Okay, so I think we can start. Hello, everyone. I am Monica Fernandes from EDP New. EDP New is the R&D center of EDP. So we work on research and development projects on the energy sector. And we organize these webinars that we call R&D sessions, where we try to communicate the knowledge that we gain in these projects, and also the aim is also to promote the discussion with experts on the topic, also to learn more about it. We started these webinars last year. Right now we are already in our 19th webinar. We already talked about different topics, for example, ocean energy, battery energy storage, blockchain, so several topics, as you can see. If you didn't have the chance to watch these webinars live, you can go to our website where you can watch them. You will find all of these different topics. And for today's session, as you know, we prepared a session about the economics of offshore green hydrogen production from wind energy. From what I can say, it's a very interesting session. Normally, we use the structure where we present the topic firstly, and then we have a roundtable where we gather experts on the topic that will help us to understand more about the topic. For the ones that have been joining us every month, we might be noticing that this format is a little bit different from the other ones. We believe it's more dynamic. We can have more people at the same time. And one thing that changes with this format is the Q&A. So we will have some time for people to ask questions to our guests. I would ask you if you want to ask a question to raise your hand, and then our moderator will tell your name, and we will give access to you to turn on your camera or microphone if you want, and then you can ask the question to our guests. So this is the new rule. So just summarizing, if you want to ask questions, you just need to raise your hand. And that's all from my side. I will pass the screen to my colleague Alex that will moderate this webinar. And thank you for joining, and I wish you all a great session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Monica. So, and good afternoon to everyone. So without further ado, let's have a look to the agenda of today. So I will start with a small introduction of the BEHYOND project, which is why we are today speaking about offshore hydrogen production from wind power. Then we will dig a bit more on the economics related to the offshore production of hydrogen, with a presentation on the BEHYOND bankability study by two MBA candidates of the Imperial College Business School. And finally, we will finish with a roundtable, as already mentioned, where we will discuss with three guests, and we will also answer your question. So, since in these days the COP26 is taking place in Glasgow, I thought it was appropriate to start our discussion with this headline from the New York Times that summarizes the situation that we are at. Quote, "Yes, there has been progress on climate. No, is not nearly enough." Unquote. As you can see from this graph, in fact, it's evident how far we are from reaching the goal to keep the global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, with the policies that are currently being adopted from the 99% of the nation around the world. Consequently, the main conclusion that we can draw is that we cannot entirely rely on our governments to solve climate change, but we need to participate, to contribute as much as we can as individuals, but even more as companies. And it is for this reason that I'm happy to be here today to speak about the contribution that the BEHYOND projects wants to give by studying how to produce offshore green hydrogen in large scale from wind energy. Because we know that hydrogen is a fundamental tool to decarbonize our economy, but only under one condition, that it must be green. But this is not something straightforward, since at the moment less than 1% of the hydrogen is produced from renewables. Consequently, the dynamics of producing green hydrogen in large scale, in a scale capable of replacing the current fossil-based supply, need further research. And this is exactly what our project is about. But let me explain a bit more what the BEHYOND project is and what it aims to. So, the main objective of the BEHYOND project is to develop a conceptual modular solution to produce hydrogen in large scale from offshore wind energy. The project lasted 1 year and it started the 26th October 2020. The total project budget is about 665,000 euros, 67% of which has been financed by the EU grants funding mechanism under the Blue Growth program. This project has been jointly developed by a consortium of companies, which is composed by ADP as project managers, Technic FMC, WAVEC, SEIA, and the University of Norway. The project followed a very logical workflow, which can be divided in 3 main phases, and this slide presents the first one, which we call market analysis. In this phase, we started by assessing the strategic markets which are more likely to support the growth of offshore hydrogen production. Then we identified the possible offshore wind to hydrogen concept, and we built a techno-economic model to evaluate their competitiveness. The results from the techno-economic model allowed us to select 2 specific concepts, which are the one that are illustrated here. And the left one shows a decentralized solution that is able to produce hydrogen directly on floating wind turbines, while the right concept presents a centralized bottom-fixed platform converting in hydrogen the energy that comes from multiple turbines. Both systems then export the produced hydrogen to shore through a pipeline. In the second phase, we further developed our architectures by addressing the concept engineering. We started by identifying the system requirements, the relative standards, guidelines, and the most appropriate materials. Then we defined all the critical subsystems of the hydrogen production module and draft the operational philosophies and OEM strategies. You can see the different subsystems in the figures below with different colors depending on their type. Finally, we defined both the bottom fixed and the floating substructures and investigated the relative offshore operation and the economic impacts. In the third and last phase of the project, we focus on the commercialization roadmap. In this phase, we aim to contribute to the bankability of the proposed concepts by assessing the industrial readiness level across the supply chain and by implementing a risk management strategy which was able to identify, quantify, and mitigate the risk inherent to all the development stages. Finally, to further improve the bankable hydrogen business model and allow access to the required capital investment, a bankability analysis has been performed by a group of Imperial College MBA candidates, who will now present their main conclusion. So it's with pleasure that I present to you Rodrigo Gonzalez, and while unfortunately Vitor de Pontes had a last-minute impediment and could not join us today. So to present Rodrigo, he holds a double master degree in coastal and harbor engineering and in maritime economics and logistics. He is currently an MBA candidate at the Imperial Business School with a strong focus on energy transition. Moreover, Rodrigo is a senior consultant specialized in large infrastructure commercial due diligence. He currently leads Moffat & Nichols commercial advisory team in London, focusing on EMEA and South America. So please, Rodrigo, the floor is yours. You can share your screen.
Thanks, Alex. Let me just share my screen here for a minute. Well, hello everyone. Let me just make sure I do this right. how do I share my screen? Okay. Please let me know when you can see my screen and if you are actually seeing the bankability analysis slides. Right. Well, hello everyone. It's really great pleasure to be here. I'm representing the wider group. Unfortunately, Vitor was supposed to be here with me, but he had some last-minute family emergency. So we are very happy to be here. As I said, our group has been involved in supporting the BEHYOND consortium with the bankability analysis, underpinned by a brief market overview of green hydrogen and its production. First of all, we'd like to thank the consortium in general, EDP and WAVEC in particular, for this opportunity and to be speaking here today. So today, after a brief introduction, we're going to touch base on the green hydrogen supply and demand, and then focus on our contribution to the bankability analysis. So we are a group of students from Imperial Business School. Despite all of us having in excess of 8 years experience, Nathan actually has energy mergers and acquisition experience, but hydrogen is relatively new for us. But at Imperial, there's a strong focus on energy transition, which is great. And we reached out to WAVEC, which I would like to thank again. And then WAVEC reached out to EDP, and we are here today. So we helped the BEHYOND project with the work package 6, task 6.4, which is the bankability analysis. Now, I'm going to speak a bit about the green hydrogen supply and all the colors, as most of you must be familiar with these colors. But see, currently almost all hydrogen are produced from gas, coal, or oil. As you can see there, 78% of the hydrogen produced today is made through steam methane reformation. The other big chunk of the hydrogen produced today is made by coal gasification. They're made by using these techniques because the existing technology is well known and the technology is proven and it's very cost efficient. However, it is, there's a lot of CO2 emissions involved in these processes. BEHYOND focus on the electrolysis solution, which is producing green hydrogen. So the energy source is green, so offshore wind, and the production through electrolysis will not generate any CO2. Okay, there's the transportation and storage section, which is a different, but it's very, very climate friendly. There's another two methods. One is the so-called blue, which is the same as using gas, but with carbon capture and sequestration, which intends to reduce the CO2 intensity of the process, and the methane pyrolysis, which is relatively new. And at the moment, these two technologies account for very little to none hydrogen production. Now, the policy is very important. Again, as most of you must be aware of this, the European Union Strategic Hydrogen Objective will have a far-reaching impact on the sector. So the strategic objective of the European Union is to install in excess of 40 gigawatts of renewable electrolyzers by 2030. In this graph, we summarize which nations have committed to install green electrolyzers, which this will require in excess of 60 gigawatts of specifically wind hydrogen. This is so to fulfill this new hydrogen push. So this has huge implications on the requirements for investment in renewables. So the European Union assumes 80 to 120 gigawatts of renewable capacity will be required to meet green hydrogen targets. So as I mentioned before, 60 of these are expected to be wind offshore. The leading technologies varies by region, but sorry, I said 60 gigawatts of offshore. I mean onshore and offshore. Apologize. So as you might imagine, in the Northern European countries, is offshore wind and onshore wind are the most competitive technologies, and in the Southern Europe, the solar is the one that is expected to generate the more competitive renewable power. Now, as you might also know, the costs of green hydrogen, in this case, we're focusing a lot on electrolysis because it's the purpose of BEHYOND, and they vary dramatically. So 2020, depending on the sources, it can vary from 10 to $2.5–3 dollars per kilogram of hydrogen, and this is expected to decrease a lot. As you can see, by 2050, green hydrogen is expected to be the cheapest solution. The normal steam methane reformation is expected to phase out, as you know, regulation and carbon price would just push them out of the market. An important development is the expected introduction of Chinese electrolyzers, which estimated to be 80% lower cost than what we have today. And of course, the R&D processes, which that's a part that BEHYOND plays on learning by doing and having this, reducing the costs. Having said that, offshore wind is the dominant proportion of the confirmed green hydrogen projects. Now, the size of the potential resources and location is what is driving this skew. Well, it's the location or the countries that are pushing the green hydrogen wave and are really putting a lot of money into it. See, whilst market forecasts place photovoltaic supply to green hydrogen as the lower end of the LCOH spectrum, the poor solar resources in the countries leading the green hydrogen development, namely in Northern Europe, and the absence of a centralized market for green hydrogen to allow trading, so the merchants production, and the lack with the lack of transportation infrastructure, means that the offshore wind is the big energy to be the big green renewable to be considered. Mostly because the Northern European countries have a lot of offshore wind, and they are pushing the hydrogen wave. We've selected some offshore wind to hydrogen projects, and there are some really interesting ones that we would like to highlight here. One is the Dolphin, which is here in the UK, which is a development which foresees an onboard electrolyzer for floating wind turbines, which is very interesting. The other one is the Gigastack, which is also in the UK, and is highlighted here because of the size. So 1.4 gigawatt offshore wind farm is, very large, and just shows the seriousness of the investment that is being done now in hydrogen or offshore wind to hydrogen. The other one we highlighted is in the Netherlands, and it's to highlight how it's partnered with a fertilizer company. For us, it's important to highlight the strategic partners that come in the early stages of development, which we'll go back to this a bit later in the presentation. We now going to talk a bit about the demand. Now there's time for a short question if needed, or we can.
Yes, I saw already we have also a question from the public. I believe Nora would like to make a question. If we can unlock her microphone, she can pose maybe the question directly. And I have also a question as well. Maybe I can start with mine. If you can come back to I think it was slide 7, I'm not sure, but the one with the prices, yeah, this one. So we can see that there is a wide range of LCOH in 2020 related to the green hydrogen, let's say. Would you mind to specify which sources are at the lower and the higher band of this,
Yeah.
this range?
So the graph is generic in source, but what we the lower band of the green of the green hydrogen LCOH, we believe it's solar, because solar in certain areas have the lowest LCOEs these days, and at the top band you will find green hydrogen produced with offshore floating wind. So to put in perspective, some estimates that today you could be somewhere in the round of 9 to 9.5 pounds per kilogram of hydrogen, whilst with the solar should be something between 4 and 5 pounds per kilogram. Now the forecasts are in particular for that offshore floating, to go down to 1.8 pounds per kilogram in 250. So it's probably still here at the top part of the price spectrum, but as you can see, the forecast in the market, in the kind of market studies we had gained access to, is of a cost reduction, very, very intense cost reduction.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the explanation. I'm not sure if Nora can already speak. I think your microphone is allowed. Can you hear us? Well, otherwise you can continue, and we will try to ask Nora again at the end of the session.
Yeah, I can continue, and then I can answer any questions to the best of my ability at the end of the session. So also we talked about the demand. So refining and ammonia at today are the main sources of pure hydrogen demand. But however, the future is very different, as we know. So transportation is expected to be a very important sector. And hydrogen is expected to penetrate markets where, especially where electricity are difficult to electrify, like transportation of heavy-duty vehicles, heavy industry, and energy storage. Now, we thought this statement from Bloomberg New Energy Finance was very interesting. As I mentioned before, policy is critical to support the green hydrogen market in the future. So BNF estimated 150 billion US dollars in subsidies are needed to support policy initiatives until 2030. They further estimate demand for industries with a strong and a weak policy. As you can see, transport is expected to be the single highest source of demand, even if you have a weak policy. So its transportation will be a big important sector. So as a good segue is that hydrogen is more likely to thrive in sectors hard to electrify. Through our research, we found that competing with electricity is very hard because electricity is seen as the energy of the future. But will only be possible. We see more hydrogen and electricity as a complement. We further consolidated some market intelligence on which sectors are likely to be the drivers of the market penetration / market growth of hydrogen. As you can see, this we split into a quadrant graph where sectors that are hard to electrify and has implementing switch is easy to use hydrogen, then are likely to push the hydrogen market in the beginning. So the main sectors are industrial, huge usage, and transport. Transport, with the exception with light vehicles, where electrification is possible. It's a big debate, electric vehicles versus fuel cells. Some people say it's electric vehicles all the way. We just thought better to stay away from that competition. So, and we tried to put it in perspective in a timeline, a high-level timeline. We see it as heavy industry being the real driver, and then heavy-duty vehicles, heating and cooling, and shipping and air travel, mostly through power to liquids at the later stages. To put this into perspective, policy, again, going back to the policy and the importance of carbon pricing. So even in 2050, when $1 per kilogram of hydrogen is achieved, one would still need a carbon price between 15 and 160 tons to match the most economical fossil fuel currency in use. So you can see for something like shipping, you would need in 2050 a cost of even at the cost of $1 per kilogram of hydrogen, you'd need a carbon price of $145 per ton to make green hydrogen the most competing source of energy. Obviously, policy, again, will play an important role because some of the more competitive power sources might be dephased. Oh, sorry, going the wrong direction. Now we pass to our bankability analysis. Now, BEHYOND LCOA landed at 3.84 euro per kilogram on its hydrogen-only solution. We believe that this will be highly unlikely to see widespread demand for this output as at that price point. Without this, certainly cash flows, the economics of even pilot projects are difficult to reconcile with any commercial forms of financing. The alternative is government incentives or regulatory requirements to purchase non-carbon neutral hydrogen for industry. This is one of our first kind of approaches. And here we just put it into perspective. The great majority, number of demonstration projects are currently under development, mostly backed by strategic investors. So this is, I'm going back to that slide that I presented earlier. Looking for know-how and to drive the cost downs. So they are not looking for, putting capital in. It's more like know-how and drive the costs down. Another conclusion is that the technical economic model assumes 2025 as the year of initial investment for BEHYOND, and despite it considering the cost curve going down between today and 2025, the implementation is not phased. So as you can see from the 2030 and 2050, there's some serious install costs gains to be harnessed from, again, these know-how and pilot projects development. So but cost reduction assumptions mostly justified by the improved turbine technology and reduced electrolyzer costs. As you know, electricity is a huge cost component of electrolyzers. Of electrolyzing. So increase developers' experience, the industry maturity, and economies of scale. So the components get cheaper. Oops. So we decided to use IRENA's kind of development stages to frame BEHYOND's bankability. We believe that BEHYOND is in the first stage, technology readiness. So is to be used, more likely to be used in demonstration projects only. And the larger barrier to greater use is its cost. governments and subsidies will remain a significant player. And the action requires to kind of is a long-term climate policy commitment, net zero, short-term policy to close the gap between investment and operational costs, R&D funding, co-funding of prototypes, and demonstration projects, lower cost of capital. So this is what this stage of the market development encloses. So when we then go further on this, progression of industry and perceived risk drives discount rates. Despite the technology being known, developments at scale are still not existent. This is even more clear when considering offshore wind to green hydrogen production. As you can see, we put BEHYOND and the technology creation stage, not even at the market penetration stage. Another conclusion is the WACC used and beyond, the project used a WACC of 6%, and it's likely to be too low for any commercial financing that, I don't know, could be available at this stage, although we also concluded that it's very unlikely that any commercial financing is available at this stage. But you know, it's risk and return, and this doesn't mean that the project can't be successfully implemented. It's just about identifying the right people to support it. So at this stage, a technology creation is more likely to have negative returns, and what you're gaining is the learning, the know-how. So finance sources likely to come from development grants, government programs, and strategic investor. So a strategic investor is someone that gains that knowledge for their operations, for example, EDP. So in the market penetration stage, at later stages, we foresee low to medium single-digit returns, depending on the policy. Could be relatively low risk, depending on the policy. If there's a contract for differences or other types of mechanism that ensure that you get a difference between what the cost of the LCOH you're having in the market. We can expect to see already a mix of strategic and institutional investors coming in. And it's important to say that we need risk mitigation mechanisms to be in place. And the market growth stage, we expect high single-digit returns and institutional investors to take the lead. Because if you look at most of the people that supported renewable energy till today, they are institutional investors, not so much utilities. This might change. We just, this is based on past, so we can't predict the future. This is also a very important slide, and something that is important for BEHYOND is what you see here is the sources of energy and the capacity of the electrolyzer of past and future projects of production of green hydrogen. As you can see, from 2025 onwards, offshore wind is expected to take the lead. And not only the lead in number of projects, but also the power, so the scale. So scaling up, if the scale up is being underpinned by offshore wind power as the renewable source of power for the production of green hydrogen. So one of our most important conclusions is the phased deployment. So the BEHYOND project assumed the deployment of 880 megawatts electrolyzer in one go. Again, in 2025, despite one assuming some cost reductions, it would be a better option if we just phased this, because as you can see, the LCOE of offshore wind is going down. everyone is expecting to go even further down. The capacity factor is going up. The installation costs are also going down. So a better approach would be to phase the deployment of the project. So what our main conclusion is, like, pilot and demonstration projects with lower deployment capacities, then provide know-how and experience to scale up operations and bring down the costs, the capital costs, which are critical to support market growth, and also harness the benefits of the cost curves, being reducing the cost curve. So yeah, so this is one of our main conclusions for beyond bankability stage. And this was our presentation about the bankability stage. We are now I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Again, to the best of our abilities. We're not experts in hydrogen, but we've learned a lot through our research. So more than happy to answer any questions that might be out there.
Great. Thanks a lot, Rodrigo, for your great presentation. And I will quickly answer a question that was posed in the chat about if the seawater needs to be desalinated before to go in the electrolysis process, and the answer is yes. It needs to be, let's say, pure water, so it needs to be desalinated first. So now is the moment also, if anyone from the audience would like to pose a question, please just raise your hands or write in a chat if you're more comfortable. Meanwhile, maybe I can pose a question to Rodrigo, because as you know, during Beyond, we focus as target geographies to the UK, the Netherlands, and Germany. And I was wondering if you know what sectors are key in the hydrogen national strategies of these countries, and if they are expected to receive a larger portion of R&D fundings.
Yeah, we gain access to data on past and future hydrogen projects, not necessarily green hydrogen, but just hydrogen, which is an indication of the sectors that the green hydrogen will then be used in for these 3 countries in specific. So a very rewarding exercise for us was to put, like, where were the technology being developed to support what sectors in the past and in the future. You see Germany and the UK moving away from using hydrogen for power generation as we learn more and more about hydrogen, and supporting more mobility and domestic heating for the UK, and specifically industrial use for Germany. The Netherlands is a mix, is expected to be very active in mobility and industry, but as well as chemical feedstock. One particular thing that kind of caught my attention in particular is Germany having a stronger push on the synthetic fuels for mobility. So yeah, I would say mobility, domestic heating, industry, and some chemical feedstock, yeah. Which are, you know, sectors that are hard to some of these are hard to electrify.
Sure. Okay. Thanks again for your answer. We received a couple of questions on the chat. I will try to answer quickly to them before to pass to the round table, because we are a bit short in time. So one of the questions was regarding the size of the wind farm that in our analysis. So the size of the wind farm is we consider 1 gigawatt wind farm, and in our decentralized solution, the corresponding capacity of the electrolyzer power plant is around the 80% of the wind farm power plant, and we have as a result an LCOH around €4 per kilowatts. Regarding the amount of hydrogen produced by hour, I do not recall it. I don't know if anyone of my colleagues can answer that. Otherwise, there is also another question that says why we don't consider nuclear power plants as free carbon sources for hydrogen production, and we wanted to focus on canonical renewables, as nuclear power plants cannot completely be classified as one. Okay. Having said that, I believe we can pass to the round table. Just let me share my screen once again, and hopefully you will see it in just 1 second. And okay, so we will now pass to the roundtable discussion, and let me present our guests as first step. So we have Pedro Valverde, Filipa Reis, and Nuno Vaz. So Pedro Valverde is currently manager at the project development as execution at the DPR H2BU, where he is responsible for the implementation of several hydrogen projects. Pedro is graduated in electrical engineering from the Istituto Superior Tecnico, and he also holds a post-graduation in project management and evaluation by Universidade Católica Portuguesa. Pedro is also non-executive director at WAVEC since 2016, and previously he has involved in the management and implementation of the WindFloat project, which is the first offshore floating wind power system in Portugal, and he was member of the technical committee. Filipa Reis is head of cleaner energy at ADP Innovation. She holds a master degree in physics engineering and a PhD in sustainable energy systems within the MIT Portugal program. During her PhD, she worked in close collaboration with a startup, being involved in the product development of a new concentration photovoltaic system. Filipa joined ADP Innovation in 2015, and since then she has been involved in the development of projects within the renewables topics, namely focusing on solar, wind, and hydrogen, looking for innovative technologies and new business models that can bring added value to ADP. Nuno Vaz is a civil engineer, experienced in structures and simulation. He holds a master degree in system engineering, and he also passionate for energy systems. Nuno started his career as structural engineering in the construction business, accumulating different roles for during 11 years. After 12 years in Norway, working in oil and gas subsea production system projects, he has returned to Portugal to support the energy transition development through Technip FMC new energy venture portfolio offering. So great, and welcome to everyone. And to start, so we have prepared some questions, which I will address to you individually. But please also feel free to complement the answer of each other if you would like to add something. So the first question is for Pedro, and is the following. What do you think is the value that green hydrogen will bring to the energy sector?
Hello, Alex. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to speak in this session. I think there are no doubts today that we clearly need to decarbonize our industry, but we are all aware that we cannot just electrify everything. Electrification is also one of the most efficient ways to transport energy, but we cannot address all the sectors to provide the energy that's needed. There are a couple sectors, for example, heavy duty industry, high heat demand, heavy duty transportation, shipping, aviation. Those kind of industries, they are difficult to electrify. And with the technology that we have currently, it's not possible. So we need to find a new energy vector that can address those sectors. One of the solutions it's hydrogen. We believe that is, I would say, the most efficient environmentally. That can be completely zero carbon. So we believe that to achieve carbon neutrality in the next decades, we clearly need to bet on hydrogen. There are several challenges that we can speak later in the session, but European Commission and several countries, they have clear roadmaps to implement this solution and to decarbonize the industry using hydrogen. There are funds available. There is willingness from the companies and from the industry to support this development. So I think we, as EDP and other utilities, we need to do our effort also to take advantage of the funds and the interest that exists, so that we can decarbonize the industry in the next decade. It's going to be a challenge, but we believe that with all our effort and having a strong and stable regulatory framework, I think we can achieve that challenge.
Okay, thank you, Pedro. I totally agree with your vision. And now a question for Filipa. What do you think is important? Why do you think is important to bring hydrogen production offshore and couple it with the wind energy?
First of all, hello everyone, and Alex, thank you for the invitation, for being here. I think there are several reasons, and the first one is the offshore wind resource potential. I mean, we are all of us are aware that today offshore wind is still in the early stage of the learning curve when compared to the solar and the onshore wind. However, the costs are falling down as optimization of the floating structures evolves and as bigger wind turbines are becoming available, which, by the way, will bring some challenges onshore. And I think that these bigger wind turbines, along with the more stable resource provided, will provide access to higher capacity factors, which by one hand will decrease the LCOE, and on the other hand will increase the utilization rate of the electrolyzers, thus allowing a cheaper cost of unit on hydrogen. And the second reason is there might be some challenges with the land resource requirements. I mean, the project size plays a role in the hydrogen costs, because while the cost of electricity cables will rise as the project scales, the cost of the pipelines for hydrogen significantly decrease for multi-gigawatt projects. And offshore wind scalability will be easier, not being constrained by the land availability. So I think these are the main two reasons to bring offshore the hydrogen coupled with wind. But we can also point on other reasons, such as closeness to the industrial hydrogen consumers, which are mostly located in the coastal zone. Probably long transportation easiness when we're thinking about shipping. And even if we think in a more futuristic view, repurposing easiness in the sense of relocating generation in the long term. So I think these are the main reasons to bring hydrogen offshore.
Okay, thank you, Filipa, for your answer. And the next question will be instead for Nuno. So, Nuno, why do you think it is important for your company to start now developing technical solutions as the one that we developed in BEHYOND, which, as we saw before, are not economically viable yet?
Thank you, Alice. Thank you for the invitation. Hello, everyone. So actually, Technip FMC has started some time ago. It's not starting now. So we started in 2016 when we developed the first concept of the Deep Purple, which at the time aimed to the decarbonization of the offshore oil and gas installations through green hydrogen. Technip FMC as energy systems engineering, procurement, construction and installation company has been supporting the major oil and gas operator clients that we have on the energy transition journey. So this is something that we have been trying to help our main customers with. But in parallel, by bringing the long experience in the subsea production systems and within the umbilical risers and flow line projects that we have from in the past, we started to have a new business segment such as the large-scale green hydrogen production, which has enabled us to partner with new utility companies such as EDP to help on to be more competitive when bidding on in the future for offshore licensing tenders. Doing also picking up on the question that you have previously on nuclear, I can give you an example. Another company that is currently our partner in the Kongsberg pilot, Vattenfall, which is Swedish utility company. They come from nuclear. Their portfolio is 35%, I believe, on nuclear power, and they're trying to push away from nuclear to more renewable type of energy.
Okay, thank you, Nuno, for the insight. And maybe we can come back to Pedro and connect to something you were mentioning before about the challenges of this technology. So Pedro, what do you think are the challenges that offshore hydrogen production needs to overcome?
Hydrogen production, it's already a known technology. At large scale, it uses typically SMR, so steam methane reforming. That's not really what we are looking for. We are looking to electrolyzers, and this is also a technology that exists for decades. That it's a proven technology. There is still some technology developments that can happen, but the technology itself, it's a technology that is proven. The main challenge that we are facing currently is that we are using this technology in a different context, and that different context is connected directly to renewables. So all the volatility that the renewables have today, they need to be the electrolyzer needs to couple with that and needs to behave well with that volatility. That is a challenge. There is not much tests and projects on that work front. So there it clearly needs development and testing and prototyping that direct connection. On offshore wind, in the case of the project that we are talking about, it will be connected directly to a turbine, and there are several benefits on that, because you can avoid some components like inverters, etc., because electrolyzers, they work on direct voltage. So if you connect them directly to the turbine, that's a plus in terms of cost, instead of connecting them to the AC grid. And we are aware that wind turbine manufacturers, they are looking very seriously to this kind of technologies. So it really shows that the market it's progressing, it's interested on developing this technology. Apart from that, recently it has appeared some electrolyzers manufacturers. The market today is still very concentrated. There are very few players and with few capacity to deliver a huge capacity of electrolyzers. So the supply in terms of equipment is clearly short when compared to expectations of demand, because the expectations of demand will be huge if we want to meet the targets, and currently the market doesn't have that capacity to deliver the technology. Apart from that, their manufacturing processes are still very manual, so they need to improve that. They need to automatize their process. They need to be more efficient, and probably they also need to develop their technology so that it's more energy efficient throughout the process. Today we are talking about efficiency around 70%. We need to increase that, and that will have a significant implication in the cost of hydrogen produced. I think we have not mentioned this during the presentation, but currently the cost of hydrogen produced by electrolyzers, it's 50 to 70, 80%, depending on the project. It comes from electricity. So clearly electricity needs to also to face a deep reduction so that we can produce hydrogen in a competitive way. So I believe these are the challenges. That I didn't cover exhaustively all the challenges, but I think these are the main ones.
Okay, thank you, Nuno. I think just one additional challenge that we are addressing in BEHYOND is in besides like coupling the production of hydrogen with intermittent renewable sources, also to do this offshore, directly offshore, which are challenge more maybe. And another, probably the last question, because we are running out of time, for Philippa. So Philippa, what do you think is the best feature of green hydrogen production that could benefit your entity?
Well, I think that there are two main benefits for EDP by addressing green hydrogen. The first one, because EDP is committed with the energy transition towards carbon neutrality, and to handle that, as Pedro already mentioned, we need green hydrogen to address the hard to electrify sectors. So it is very important to anticipate trends in the sector, identifying innovative systems, configurations, new business models that will position EDP on the supply of affordable green hydrogen to unlock new revenue streams. And on the other side, as already mentioned, green hydrogen demands for green electricity generated by dedicated renewables. So EDP has already a clear pipeline of renewables dedicated to electricity generation, but green hydrogen will pull an accelerated growth of renewables portfolio dedicated to hydrogen production. And also, it can even significantly unlock offshore growth. If we think about coupling hydrogen with offshore wind production, it will bring a competitive advantage, for instance, for the offshore tenders, namely in geographies where EDP intends to consolidate its position. So I think these are the main benefits for EDP.
Okay, thank you, Philippa. And maybe one very fast last question, as we're already on the limit for Nuno to close the round. So Nuno, what do you think is the potential of systems like the one we developed in BEHYOND?
Well, to answer shortly, to have a modular and scalable type of solution that is able to store energy at offshore locations which have a high production profile. So we have been looking so far at coastal or near to shore types of applications, but when we start entering into the open water, deep sea types of possibilities, the estimates are around 12,000 gigawatts of wind power capacity that can be explored. So that's a huge potential that we could target with a system such as the one that we develop on BEHYOND. And I would take the opportunity to answer a question that was raised by Pierre Alexander. So in terms of, is asking on how much of the existing technology from oil and gas can be reused for offshore wind, and what's missing and still needs to be developed. So basically, what we can capture from the oil and gas is all the risers, all the flow lines, connections, the control systems that we have that addresses both the topside and the subsea environment. Everything else, the major gaps that we have, is to push the equipment, the OEM equipment, that is part of the system. And here I'm talking about the electrolyzer, compressor, water treatment system, desalinization. So all of these systems, which have different types of TRLs, need to be, on one hand, need to be at the same level, so that the system can integrate perfectly and we have a functional commercial offering on this. But as Pedro mentioned, there's also the struggle on the supply chain side, because we need to create an industry that supports offshore green hydrogen production in order to have an accelerated development from the suppliers to meet the supply demand. Otherwise, core parts of the system or subsystem, like the electrolyzer, become a bottleneck, considering the lack of capacity from the current vendors to supply the needed equipment. And we are talking on equipment that is to target onshore applications. So we are not even at the level of deploying systems that can be deployed on offshore conditions and environment.
Great. Thank you, Nuno, for your quick answers. And well, okay, everyone. So thank you to all of you to have participated to the roundtable. We can now close this discussion. And I would like just to thank everyone who attended this session and arrived till here. And I will just quickly pass the word again to my colleague Monica for the conclusion and closing this session. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you, Alex. And so we just reached to the end of this webinar, and I want to thank you all for that contributed to this session. Firstly, to our guests, thank you very much for your availability and for your time to be here and to share with all of us your knowledge. Also to Alex to be able to organize this session, and also to the attendees for being every month in every webinar that we organize with us. And next, we are already preparing the next session that will be in the second week of December. We are still figuring out the day, so make sure you don't miss it. We will communicate it in our website as usual. So thank you all, and see you in the next webinar. Thank you.